Okay, folks, hello, good evening, welcome. Thank you for coming. We're going to begin our public hearing in just a moment. And I just want to mention again, there's a sign-in sheet at the back. If you didn't have a chance, do please sign it so that your attendance at the public hearing will be recorded. So, thank you very much. Is there a motion to open the public hearing on the waterfront master plan?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's 7:08 and the public hearing is open. We're going to begin. I'd like to introduce Brandy Nelson from the Village Designated Engineering Firm Crawford & Associates. Who many of you know, she's been here for years and years working on this project with us. So Brandy, if you want to kind of get folks up to speed, and then we'll open it up to your comments and questions.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to give you a really brief overview of why we're here tonight and what we're talking about. As many of you know, because I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd there, after about a decade of negotiating with various railroad entities, the village was able to acquire 2.34 acres of land down on the waterfront. Prior to this, the village's access to the waterfront was entirely cut off by the railroad tracks. So there are two parcels. They're outlined in dark here on this drawing. This is at the end of Diana Street and just below Friendship Street at the end of Broadway. And so the village owns a parcel on the east side of the tracks and a parcel on the west side of the tracks. The river is in blue, the land area is in green. So you can see on the west side of the tracks we just have a little bit of land. On the east side of the tracks there's obviously more land. And the goal of the project has always been to find a way to move people, pedestrians, and kayakers and nature lovers safely from the east side to the west side of the tracks. So the master plan for the project, which is what we're here discussing tonight, we're reviewing the master plan for the purposes of conducting the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which is the state environmental quality law, making sure that we're looking comprehensively at the project for a comprehensive review of the environmental impacts of the project. And then specifically, the Department of State has been working with the village and has granted the village some funds to stabilize the shoreline on the western parcel. I was just saying to the trustees, I was looking at some pictures from 10 years ago, and there was more land on the west side 10 years ago. There's a lot of wind erosion, wave action erosion from the shipping channels, from the tidal action, and then there's ice scour. If you go down there now, there's great big chunks of ice scouring away the land. So in an effort to preserve the land so that the fundraising and the planning and design work in coordination with the railroad can continue so that we can reach the goal of having the waterfront park, we need to first stabilize the shoreline. But seeker doesn't allow us to just look at that action, we need to look at the whole action. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're going to look at the master plan for the project. So real briefly, I just wanted to run through that acquisition of the property was done in 2008. And again, we acquired 2.34 acres from the railroad. That was done with help and funds from the Department of State, Dutchess County, and Scenic Hudson, and village funds. And then from 2008 to 2015, there were several years spent evaluating different options for crossing the railroad tracks. So one of the goals of this project is to close the at-grade crossing, except for emergency purposes, and have a suitable overpass above the tracks. The village, I believe, looked at under the tracks, over the tracks, around the tracks. So we've looked at several different structures. And over the years, the goal has been to balance, for the overpass, a balance of the clearance requirements that are required by the railroad, and to provide safe pedestrian access to meet American with Disabilities Act requirements, so handicap accessibility, and to try and minimize the bulk and size of the structure. So we have a clearance requirement that puts us at a certain height, because we have to have a certain amount of height between the railroad tracks, trains, and the bottom of the structure. So in 2015, the village worked with students from RPI, and they came up with a competition to plan different types of structures and different ways to cross the tracks. And they came up with an open ironwork structure, sort of similar to what Rhinecliff has, that would not have an elevator tower. So those of you who've been involved with this process many years may remember that there was a proposal at one point to have 2 elevator towers, and they were really kind of massive, and there was some concern about the impacts of having a big structure down there. So just an open ironwork structure is what's been identified as the preferred alternative, and that would meet the handicap accessibility requirements by having a rail-mounted lift system. So a wheelchair-bound person could access that lift system. There'd be a lift system on this side, and then you'd wheel across, and there'd be a second lift system on the other side. So that was 2015. In 2016, the village was successful in obtaining the current Department of State grant that we're working under, and that's to update the master plan to show the new open ironwork structure, to show parking that would be available to accommodate visitors, to show a walking path, and to show future plans for a boat launch, kayak launch, or a fishing dock into the Hudson River. In addition, the current Department of State grant, as I mentioned before, will include design and permitting shoreline stabilization along the Hudson River to mitigate the impacts of the scouring that's occurring now. That's getting really important because what we're finding is we only have about 25 feet of property on the west side, so we really need to hold on to what's there so that we have a place for people to go when they cross the tracks. So again, master plan consists of the parking area. It consists of the overpass, which would be an open ironwork structure with the lift system. Consists of docks that would go out into the Hudson River for fishing access, and some landscape improvements along with the shoreline stabilization of about 780 feet of shoreline. So that is sort of the overview. I brought with me tonight, in addition to the overall map, just some concepts for folks to be familiar with. This is actually a photo of Rhinecliff's structure, be something similar to that as far as massing. This is a dock system on the Hudson River, I believe down near Cold Springs. It's a T-shape. We've gotten some initial feedback from the state. They prefer to see a T-shaped dock system, so this is a concept of the dock system. And then this is a photo we took last week of some of the ice scour that's happening on the property. This is a photo of the concept for stabilization of the shoreline. It'll be a combination of large riprap, a little bit of bulkhead where the boat launch would be, and some vegetation to help hold everything in place. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Brandy. I also wanted to just take a moment and thank the members of our Waterfront Revitalization Committee who have been working on this for a very long time. And if you wouldn't mind raising your hand at least so that your friends and neighbors can know who you are and how much work you put into this. So I appreciate all those hours and that you're here tonight. Okay, let's open it up.
So how many, I know there's been some resistance to how much we can actually add to what we have now, which isn't much anymore in the way of land on the other side, on the west side of the tracks. So, and I understand that there's a lot of resistance on the DEC's part to our doing anything substantial. Can you say exactly how much we're allowed to add and how secure that's going to be, and how we would be able to have some of that in place before we move into things like a crossing over and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So that's a really good question because the state will drive a lot of what can be done on the Hudson River side. If you've been involved with this project for many, many years, you'll remember that the bulkheads, the old bulkheads, are actually out here. Right. And many, many years ago, there was discussion that we could fill out to that point and reclaim all of this land. And the state has since tightened up their restrictions, and they're no longer allowing us to consider that. They'll allow us to leave and possibly make some improvements to these bulkheads as a way to dissipate wave energy and protect the shoreline, but really we're going to be limited to preserving the shoreline pretty much as it is currently. They really don't want us to add any additional fill, so they're very restrictive about that. And that's we're dealing with 3 agencies in that respect. So it's the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is the primary agency, the New York State Department of State, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And you know, the mayor and I had a meeting with those 3 agencies, and it was a challenging conversation because, you know, we want to hold this where it is, and we'd like to fill out a little bit, but they're only going to allow us to fill enough to land this structure if we find that we don't have enough space to land the west side of the overpass.
So then where would we have a park?
The park is really going to be a long linear strip that'll be suitable for picnicking, but not much in the way of assembly space or anything like that. We're going to have to accentuate accessibility with boat launches and other structures.
And how much, say, assembly space is there on the east side after the parking lot?
On the east side, we have about 1.5 acres. So on the east side, we've got some potential. We recently communicated some numbers to the DEC. On the west side, we've got about 1 acre, but we only have about 1/3 of an acre of land on that side. And that's why it's so important as a first step to stabilize that shoreline so that we preserve that 1/3 of an acre for available use. On the west, or on the east side, we've got about 1.5 acres, and most of that is developable. So there's more potential for a lawn space there where you could have some sort of gatherings.
And we did have to put in a parking lot too in that larger chunk.
Yeah, what we're showing is 6 spaces that would be paved, and then some overflow spaces that would be maybe a reinforced turf, or something that would be more of a grassy space and have dual use. Yes.
If we don't move on this quickly, we're going to have a lot less than 1/3 of an acre on that side to work with come the next storm. But it's interesting that you have on the east side of the tracks all of that in blue color, because most of it is underwater on the east side, because the railroad, when they took away their power lines and buried their cable, they blocked the drainage that at the bottom of Broadway, that's just water now that fills up
Here?
in that area, yeah.
Where that basin is, that sort of settled area?
Well, there's no drainage anymore there.
Okay.
And the whole, the north side of all that blue is now all storage for about 10,000 railroad ties.
Mm-hmm.
So to have a park adjacent to a storage area of railroad ties covered with creosote is a big negative. And we've been unable, because of the railroad laws, to do anything to stop Amtrak from doing that.
Right, right. And you and I had a conversation a couple months ago about that. Unfortunately, the railroad does own this area north of the proposed park, and they are storing the railroad ties as they're making some track upgrades. And because it's new railroad ties, they're considered a supply. And they are not regulated. And even though I understand that they are smelly,
They're toxic.
Yeah, I mean, and they're supposed to be, because they don't want them to rot, right? So that's why they're used as railroad ties. But unfortunately, we don't have any recourse there. I think, you know, as we get towards park design, we're probably looking at wanting a solid fence there that's pretty substantial, so that we at least don't see it from the park area.
Randy, could you talk to the drainage easements and the drainage infrastructure that would eventually be where the large puddle is now?
Yep, sure. So when the acquisition of the land occurred, we also acquired 3 drainage easements that are here, here, and here. And that's for drainage that comes now down off of Friendship and off of Broadway and goes under the tracks. To my knowledge, there's really never been any improvements to that drainage, and we do want to make sure that that gets repaired and upgraded as part of this park work. But again, that'll be a subsequent phase. With the shoreline stabilization, we'll at least pick up the ends here when we do that shoreline stabilization work. But we won't be able to do the whole drainage project until we get into further phase of the project.
But currently, if we don't get them to repair that drainage, what happens is all of their vehicles move around in that muck, and then it gets dragged up through the entire village on Broadway because it's on the treads of their vehicles.
So we are working with them right now. It's a slightly separate issue, but they have been trespassing on the village's property, storing their vehicles and things like that. So one thing that we're hoping to do in the next couple of weeks is have the parcel surveyed and staked and have it posted, no trespassing. We've been in communication with them, but Amtrak's a very big organization, and you talk to somebody in Philadelphia who says, yes, we'll take care of it, but the people that are coming out of, wherever the local offices are, they seem to have no idea. And so it's just a matter of communicating to them real plainly that this is the village's property, it's our future park, and we're laying claim to it, and we're letting you, they're on notice that they're not supposed to be trespassing.
Alex?
They did more than trespass, they built an electrical board.
Yes, we
Right on the
are
middle
working
of
with them on that
park.
issue as well. They will be removing that in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Spent a lot of time on it.
It's taken a long time to get them to move it.
The 6-car parking lot. There are lots more than 6 cars there on weekends. The idea of having a park would be that you would unify that parking situation so they're not parked all over the place. But
Right,
6 doesn't
absolutely.
seem-
And what we're showing is 6 paved spaces and then overflow for about 20 more on a reinforced turf, so that you don't have a sea of asphalt down there, that you have only asphalt where you have the highest, most regular use of parking spaces, and then some more green type infrastructure down there for your overflow parking, for your weekend situations or for your event type situations. So that's, again, it's a concept, but that's the concept that's being proposed.
Pete?
I have a few questions, and admittedly, they're coming from a slightly curmudgeonly angle, so please don't take any of that personally. Anyone, for that matter, my views on this, but I have a couple questions. I assume we have the funds to go ahead and do the shoreline stabilization? We do not.
Well,
We have the funds for a study.
We have the funds to do the design, and the permitting.
Okay.
So the goal, and I should have talked about schedule, but the goal is to, right now we're in the seeker process,
Yeah.
and we're preparing permit applications to submit to the 3 agencies I mentioned before, and get those permits in line, prepare the construction cost estimates, and then for the next round of state grant funding, which opens in July, submit applications to seek funds for that stabilization.
Now, one of the triggers that's always been put out there, and I've never been sure as to how hard set this is, but I've always heard that there was a trigger of basically once we start developing the park, then the grade crossing gets closed and it's our problem, right? So assuming we get the funds for the stabilization, does that then mean that they come in and close the grade crossing at that point?
It's
I mean,
a good
does that
question.
constitute development, or does that constitute, as it sounds, stabilization?
Yeah, we're aware of that potential issue. Any work that would be done where we would have to cross the railroad tracks, we have to coordinate with Amtrak. Because although CSX owns the land, they're leasing it for 100 years to Amtrak. And so now we're coordinating with Amtrak. We've engaged their construction division because they will want to have oversight during that work, and they seem agreeable.
They might not exist in a year.
They might not, I don't know. And maybe another railroad entity. It wouldn't be the first time a railroad entity has changed in this project. So we do have to coordinate with them, but we are calling this maintenance. That
Yeah,
this is required maintenance to just stabilize. We're not calling this park development. We're trying to be real careful about that.
In terms of the layout of the park, my understanding is that Amtrak is going to retain full control over what is now their access road, right? So when we think about this, when we think about standing down there and thinking about where the actual lines are going to be, there's probably 15 or so feet to the west of the tracks that Amtrak is still going to have and then have fenced off, right? So it's not like what we're seeing on there is what we would see if we went down there and stood along the track. So it's going to be actually even quite a bit smaller than the space that's there right now.
Amtrak has from the center line of the easterly track and from the center line of the westerly track a 25-foot offset.
Wow.
So they need to maintain what is considered like a driveway width up either side.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I gain too much more weight, I'm not even.
You would be both, right? I know. Yeah, we'll have to be real careful. That's why we have to stabilize this. That's why that's an important first step. And actually, I was just mentioning to the trustees that Amtrak, because of the drainage work that they did and the wiring work that they did, and because we're trying to get them to move this electrical panel that they put down there, we just had them survey this line in, and so right now it's actually physically marked on the ground, for those of you who are curious. There are little pink ribbons with
But there
nails
isn't
in
one
them.
on the other side.
There's not one on the other side, yeah. So you could
There's
see,
no room on the other
but it could
side.
give you a sense of what's
You could
there.
go
And
down over
it
the
looks
tape
like
measure.
when you come off the rail grade, it's about a driveway width that's available to them.
So I mean, the question for me, and this is, if this were to proceed, despite my feelings about it, I would never actually go so far as to block anything, or try to. But the question that keeps coming up to me is that in terms of expense, trying to figure out a cost-benefit analysis of not so much developing the east side, I can see the sense of that, but building such a large structure to cross over the tracks to have only access to a small sliver of land, that seems, I mean, it seems that it could be debated maybe by, let's say, the more budget conscious or more aggressively budget conscious demographics in the area, and that need not be one of them. How would you counter that? I mean, could you counter that?
I don't think, I mean, that's for us to answer and all of us to answer.
Yeah.
I don't think Randy needs to answer that right now.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that we'll continue to have access across the tracks.
What?
There's no guarantee that we'll
I
continue to
understand
have
that,
access
which
across
is
the-
why I was opposed to the original purchase.
Marty Clark.
Well, my answer to that would be, we've got the High Line in New York that doesn't go anywhere except up in the air and above the street. We'll have this, I like the evolution of that railroad structure. I think we're gonna have an elevated iron viewing point of the river. We can't get more land down there. It is our riverfront. I think at all costs, we need to maintain our hold on it. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say if all the land washed away down there, we would build a bridge that would turn into an observation platform, but that crosses my mind, that's part of the beauty of this spot down there. As far as some of these other things that come up, I think that we plan on addressing that drainage issue, Jeff, when we start construction. I think the railroad tie storage there is a temporary thing. While they rebuild tracks between here and Albany, I would guess.
It's like every 15 years or so, I think they do it, because they did it about 15 years ago or so.
I just feel like it's too precious a element to not pursue. There's tons of reasons not to do it, but I just think that we're connected to the river, and we have to make that statement no matter what, and it'll be expensive, but fabulous, like this building that we're in, and like the High Line, like the walkway across the Hudson, like the renovation of the Village Hall in Red Hook. Look what they did with that. That's a statement that's going to be there forever. That's how I view it.
Yeah. And I really do like the idea of doing an iron structure like they have in Rhine Cliff. I mean, that seems to at least acknowledge and partially ameliorate some of the concerns about these massive structures blocking views, because it's at least semi-transparent. So I like that.
I'm also pleased with that evolution of that handicap access, because it's not going to be this giant structure that will get used very seldom that we have to look at.
One other question, which was just a practicality thing, because I know that none of this is set in stone, but when it comes to the dock, I assume like a lot of these docks, because of the ice and because of the currents, it's only going to be seasonal, probably only be out 6 months out of the year. So it's going to have to be easy enough to manage, I guess, that our DPW guys are going to be able to take it in and take it out, right? It would have to be. And then where does it get stored, I guess is one question, because that's obviously not going to come across. To the other
Right,
side of the
right.
track.
We've worked with several communities on these floating dock systems, and the way they're set, they have a rail system that helps you ease them out of the water. It does take 2 or 3 kind of hefty guys to
Okay,
manage
so
it.
it can be done manually.
It can be
doesn't
and
have to
is
be-
done manually, yeah. And then typically what they do is they just store the sections immediately adjacent to the upland launch area and cover them with a tarp, and they're usually pretty good. They're aluminum and they're very
Would that
sturdy.
block access to the rest of the park? What little?
I think that's a good question and a detail that can be worked out as far as
I'm not-
operation
I'm
and
not
maintenance,
gonna-
but
I'm not stuck on that.
usually
It's
they're
just a
5 feet
question.
wide and 20 feet long, or 5 feet wide and 16 feet long. So, they're stackable. And I think right now we were looking at 4 sections. So it's not a huge amount of material. They're about, 18 inches deep. So you'd have them stacked up and they'd look like a pile of lumber, basically.
Where do they store the ones for Cheviot?
Phyllis, did you have? And then Alice?
Yeah. One of the things I was most looking forward to before we lost all our land down there was having a boathouse where we could leave our canoes so we didn't have to lug it. And the RPI guys had some idea about some kind of a cable system that would, but I don't know. Anyway, I really want to have a place to leave my canoe so I don't have to lug it in there every single time.
I think kayak lockers are still part of the master plan.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Alex?
Is there not a political solution to this? Cheviot has a park on the other side. Germantown has a park on the other side of the river without a fence and without a crossing. Now, I know before there was a different agreement or something with Amtrak, but is it possible that we can get our state representative to introduce a bill in the legislature to mandate that Amtrak allow us to cross over?
The difference, Alex, is that we had to buy the land from the railroad.
Oh, we're
And
back
the
to
land was
original.
conditional. The agreement was conditional. Cheviot and Germantown owned that land. They didn't have to buy it from anybody.
And they've been tightening up all of the grade crossing regulations across the state after a bunch of accidents, things like that. So I think more than anything, they'd love to see it closed.
But the idea of building a bridge over such a small piece of land would be a politically difficult thing to do. There will be a lot of opposition to that, not only in the area, but as a general principle of how much money we're going to spend to do this for such a small area, and that a political solution wherein we, quote, convince Amtrak through our political leaders in Albany to make an exemption for us so that we can cross over would seem a better, though still a long-term solution, would be a better idea than constructing and maintaining a crossing over the railroad tracks.
Molinaro for governor.
Well, he's the one who bought the land in the first place.
No, he
I'm
isn't.
going to just point out one or two things that I see there, Alex. First and foremost is that they've agreed to stabilization of that and possible fill of that area to provide footing for such a structure. So that might be one avenue where we can actually hang on to the little bit of land that there is there. The other point that I think we keep overlooking, we keep going, oh, it's not really worth it for such a small strip of land. We're not just talking about that small strip of land. We're talking about access and other structures such as the dock to give us access to the river itself. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind here. It's not just about that little strip of land that's there and the use of that land. It's that continual access to the river that we aren't guaranteed by the railroad.
Yeah, but I agree with that, that it's very, very important, and that's why I'm suggesting we make that commitment to a political solution. That getting the money will be difficult enough. And you're talking about that those houses on the south side of Friendship Street will be right up against that bridge. They will not be happy. They can fight this. You know, they're gonna draw it out. And the idea that you have a system that's going to bring handicapped people over on a cable.
No,
It's a lift.
It's a lift.
Are you
It's a
here
lift.
from
And if,
our
yeah,
fire
okay,
students?
but if
Presentation?
people that's going to take it over the bridge, but people who need help while they're being taken over the bridge, I can sense that it may not be robust enough a solution for everybody.
Well, I think the lift is just part of the access, that someone who is relegated to using a wheelchair wouldn't enjoy going in a boat. I mean, there's more than just the land use there. Again, even I think that Marty Clark pointed it out, even the vantage of the river from that elevated position can be something that's really enjoyable by someone who's handicapped.
Totally agreed. I'm just talking about the crossing,
Absolutely.
how that crossing is going to be built. And the idea was the original was that we could build out historically to where the bulkheads were. That's changed?
That's changed,
DEC
yes.
is
that's
no
what's-
longer considering that.
That was a hope.
It's not a good political environment for them.
I just think it's very difficult.
But people in the environmental people that I know thought that you could build out historically but not beyond.
So we met in November with the Department of Environmental Conservation, specifically as part of the kickoff of this work, as what's called a pre-application meeting, where you go and you discuss your project proposal and you confirm what the permitting requirements are. We did talk about filling out in some limited areas, and they absolutely will not give us a permit to do that. So this process is going to be a balancing act of trying to recognize all the various competing interests and finding that sweet spot where we can do something, right? So that's where we're at now. That's why we are back to just stabilizing the shoreline as the first step.
Just totally out of curiosity, what is their argument against filling it out? Is it a pollution thing?
It's a wildlife
sediment?
and habitat issue,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's basically, even though this is a tiny thing, they're thinking about
The whole
other
river,
people having
yeah.
larger projects.
The individual that we worked with is responsible for every permit along the Hudson River. That's her territory. So she looks at the river from a global perspective, and if everybody does a little fill,
Yeah.
then it's a lot of
That's a
fill.
lot of fun.
And she's very protective of maintaining the objective of not filling, and it's more of a habitat issue. Yes, ma'am?
If the crossing is going to be closed, how will people with canoes and kayaks access the launch?
It will need to be portaged up and over the walkway.
On this iron,
Yes, ma'am.
people will carry their canoes and kayaks up onto this.
And my understanding is that's the way we'll have to work, and that's one of the supporting reasons for having a kayak locker, so that once you get it up and over, you can leave it for the season and not have to go back and forth.
Is there a way for residents to maybe schedule a day with Amtrak that they could get access through the grade crossing?
Based on my understanding of the terms of the crossing, no. The term of the acquisition was closing the at-grade crossing, except for emergency purposes to access North Bay. So that's my understanding of the conditions of that agreement.
Was there not some talk with the RPI kids about some sort of system?
Another list.
Right, some sort of a lift to facilitate moving.
Or whether or not the lift system could be used to put the kayaks on.
Right.
Right, which might be an option. That way you'd use the lift to convey your kayak up, and then you would portage it across the walkway and then convey it down. So.
They have a theoretical system that was yet to be designed.
Right, I mean, I think, we're gonna have to be creative, but the overarching thing here is that we could lose access to the river at any point.
Boat cutters.
Right, but I mean,
Legal
this
access.
is, we would,
Oh.
there would be no reason for Tivoli if not for the river, so we need to hang on to this.
Other comments? Jonathan?
It may be early days yet for the lift, but is this actually a platform lift that goes parallel to the stairway? Is it in the stairway? How does that work?
So again, it's an early question, but my understanding of the concept is it's the type of lift system that has a platform that folds down that you can affix a wheelchair to, and then you're conveyed with a motorized mechanism up, and then you would disembark from the lift and you would roll across to the other side, and you do the same thing in reverse to go down. So that's my
There's
understanding.
some images of the lift in a document that's on the village website that the RPI students developed. So if anyone sort of wasn't here for that last time we all got together on this was when the RPI students were here. And, I can help you find that. They have graphics of what these lifts look like.
And it was selected because it met the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements for conveying people. It was acceptable.
Jeff?
On the east
Pete,
side, there's.
Pete, I'm just going to kind of call on people because equal time. We'll get to everyone, but yes,
Yeah.
Jeff?
To try to take into account what a few people have had concerns about regarding the closing of the crossing. Is it conceivable that the crossing would be closed by just the way the bulk of the railroad crossing is closed without it being fenced? The fact that there's no way to just drive across, but there is ways in lots of areas to cross the tracks
The terms,
without having a fence.
the terms of the purchase, which are also available, are that in the process of developing this access, a fence will be built, which will have a lock that the emergency service people can unlock and that the railroad can unlock.
But that would be a
Remember, we
fence.
did not own the land.
But that would be a fence at Diana Street,
It would be a fence all along the track.
all along the track from where to where?
So the village has to fence their property. So the fencing would run from the south side of Diana Street, okay, on the east side of the tracks, this way, and then north to Broadway. Mr. Martin's got a driveway access there at the north end that needs to be maintained open. So this portion would be fenced here. There would be a gate where Diana Street is. There would be a gate on this side where Diana Street is, because the railroad did recognize that we might have need at some point to get an ambulance over here to deal with any kind of emergency that might happen on the park side. And then this portion would be fenced.
And how far south would it go?
To the end of our
To the
parcel.
end of the property. So from Diana Street, it's about 500 feet.
500 feet.
500 feet.
Where,
So that would be like behind your house,
Yeah, I think,
right?
yeah, exactly. I think that's where it comes down to.
So on the east side, say in front of the Pellets or the
Pellets
Scarano's,
property right
there is no fence, right? Because we don't own the
That's
property.
correct.
So the fence is just on the Just want everyone to be clear about where the fence will be. And that fence will be there in the final part. That's going to be
How
when
tall will it be?
do we have a height requirement already?
I don't know how tall it'll be right now. I'm imagining it'll be 6 feet. And I know the village has expressed some interest in having it be, you know, historic, not chain link with barbed wire on the top, but maybe like wrought iron or something that has some higher aesthetic value.
And it can't be compromised that the fence is at Diana Street only, so that way there's no vehicle could drive across.
So we have to provide gates across. So the gates have to go across Diana Street. So think the long rolling gates. That's sort of what I had envisioned would go there.
Kathy?
So in other words, when you go down Diana Street, before you cross over,
Right here.
if, like you can't turn left and walk up those, like right now you can just, you know, I've done it many times with my dog.
You'll probably still be able to.
I don't personally care, it's just
Yeah,
in
no,
terms of the parameters of.
There's an element that seems silly here.
It does, yes, exactly, like you
And I
can still walk
agree.
up the tracks.
In part,
on
it's
the east
it's our terms of purchase that we will gate
Okay.
Diana Street and we will fence the length of the land parallel to the railroad tracks. I mean, the village's land terminates just on the south side of Diana Street.
So I can walk out my back door and cross over to the
You
other
can,
side.
but you won't be able to get into the park. You'll be able to walk on Amtrak's
Right.
land.
The fence is just along the edges of our parcels.
Okay.
It's not going to New York and to Albany. It's really very limited.
It's kind of strange, isn't it? Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So then once this crossover is in place, the Village of Tivoli is responsible for maintenance and so forth of the elevator and the electrical.
No elevator. There's a lift.
Lift, sorry, wrong word, lift. And the bridge and, yeah, so we are responsible for that once it's in place, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the dock.
And the docks, yes.
Yeah, any improvement that would be made on this property would be the village's.
Is there any way to find out what something like that would cost? Are there any other crossings that are similar in other towns that we would be able to find out more or less what that cost is?
Are you talking about like annual maintenance costs?
Yeah.
I don't know at this stage. We're not talking about a lot of maintenance. You know, an iron structure is, once it's constructed, they're pretty durable. They last a long
I was
time.
thinking more of the lift. That
So
seems like
the lift systems, you know, they are, I don't know if I'm adequately describing the lift system consistent with what the student said, but it's like a mechanized pulley gear system that will heave you up this side, basically. So
On a platform.
on a platform.
On a track, yes.
Think about moving shopping carts.
No, I remember from the.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to convey you up there. I know, like, well, what do you guys spend on elevator maintenance? Because it'd be probably something similar.
I think having renegotiated recently, we're at $2,500 a year.
So it's
For this
going to be
elevator.
similar to elevator maintenance. It's the same sort of thing. It's a weight-bearing lift system, so it has to be annually inspected and
Right,
maintained. So
And it's open to the elements, so.
it is, yeah, but they're designed to be open to the
Yeah.
elements, so that does factor in.
Did you say $2,500?
Well, that's what the village is spending now for elevator maintenance here at Village Hall.
Thank you.
Kathy, citizen and camera person.
I just want to address the 6 parking spaces, and from what you said, I got the impression that they'll probably be paved, and I'd like to interject the concept of permeability, if you might, that I think it might be a greener approach to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think final materials haven't been selected, but that's an excellent suggestion. And honestly, wherever we can use green materials that have either more resiliency to climate change or permeability, there's if you've been out there, you know that the ground is not permeable underneath it. It's 150 years of fill material, and it's pretty hard, compacted stuff right now. But
To nowhere.
the grant funding opportunities are, generally better if we're looking at more green approaches to materials. So that's a great suggestion. Yes.
Pete, go ahead.
If, let's say, moving forward, let's say, assume we get grant money to perform the stabilization, who would be in charge, like, who would actually do that work? I mean, would that be a contractor that we would hire? Or would that,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, the village would have to work to put out a set of contract construction documents for that work that would be consistent with the permits that we get from the state and the feds
And
to
is
do the
there
work.
gonna be somebody from the DEC hovering around to make?
Well, they'll
like,
issue a
ruler
permit.
and make sure that we're not going out.
Yeah, I mean,
fast?
generally, in our capacity as the municipal engineer, we help oversee the construction, and then we have to make sure that there's compliance with the permits and the plans. So
Compliance.
it'll go out to bid.
Okay.
It'll be a public bid, because I'm sure it'll exceed $35,000.
Other comments or questions?
I have a
Marty?
historical footnote. Woody Neese claims that that was fenced at one point down there, that everybody had a key. That's
It sounds like a really good plan.
I think
It's
he's
like
talking.
Bryant Park, right? Isn't it exactly
Yeah.
like Bryant Park? I mean, Gramercy Park, that's right.
Other comments? Yes,
Is
sir.
there lighting in this plan, like street lights down in the park, or anything like that?
So historically, there's never been a proposal for lighting, that this would be a dawn to dusk sort of operation, and that there wouldn't be proposals for having lighting down there.
But we're not gonna close the crossing at dusk. In other words,
Should be closed, period.
you can go down there, cross and have a party down there, and you have a night.
I think we as a village would have to decide what the rules for our park will be. Memorial Park closes at dusk or 10 p.m. if you read code, but, it's certainly not supposed to be used in the middle of the night. And, I think we'd all probably end up with a similar feeling about the waterfront park. But yeah, so that would, we'd have, these sorts of details, hours of operation and stuff would be coming later, but. I would just say, I've been involved in this project 7 years now, and have actually been chairman of the waterfront committee for a long time, and I've worked with some, you all out there are really great, and how many years people have put into this. And what I would just say to the whole village, and we don't have a perfect situation. We have a lot of very, constricting givens, and my personal feeling is that within that, we can make a great park, but it's not like we can have it every way we want. I mean, I think, Alex, your point about bringing in a politician to change the rules, I mean, possibly, but, for me, I've been operating within the givens that I encountered when I first came at this project, which were, Germantown already owned the west side, so the railroad couldn't tell them anything. We did not, and so that was a bargain that Tivoli took certainly years before I got involved. Things like that, I think we as a community, the fencing, sort of fencing that only goes this far and then is open on the north and south of our park, well, that's a given I've accepted because it's a given. But, this would be one of the biggest sort of long shot ambitions for this village. Personally, I think its benefits would really outweigh sorting through these difficult choices. But, we as a community are going to decide that together. Tonight, this is about getting a seeker, determination and getting a permit so we can fulfill this grant that we won. Other entities out there have given us, for example, just for this part, $50,000 to design a stable shoreline. So there are, the New York State Department of State believes in this project and its value. So I just want to sort of put those general comments out there. I mean, I know, I'm sitting up here and I'm feeling a little like, whoa, why are we doing this? Because of what I'm hearing, and I just want us to stay connected to the possibilities that this park could mean for the village. There are a lot of it's always been shifting. We've had different railroads, different mayors, different boards, different individuals at certain desks at DEC, you know. It's a fluid thing, but I think the long-term goal is still, in my opinion, worth pursuing. Maybe we'll have to turn off at some point, I don't know.
And Brandy's been involved in this project since 2005. About Marty Clark was working on it for 10 years before that, I think. It took 20 years to find an individual at the railroad who was in charge of railroad lands, who would negotiate with us. And it took us 5 years to negotiate with that entity, and it was very clear in those negotiations that the quid pro quo that they wanted was a safer crossing. That was what they were interested in.
Now, whether the park ever gets actually built, don't we need to stabilize our shoreline anyway? So, it's a thought.
When you're stabilizing it, you're using riprap to do that, or?
So the state, again, is giving us some requirements, but basically what they're moving away from are hard bulkheads for...
Like the one in Rhinecliff.
Like the one in Rhinecliff, yes.
Nice one, that looks nice.
Yeah, I know, and if you go over to Saugerties, I think they've got one, and Kingsley's got them, but they're pushing away from that now. There's a whole program, the Hudson River Estuaries program. They're very concerned about seeing the Hudson River go back to more of a natural shoreline. They think it's better for habitat, it's better for flood control, it makes the waterfront more resilient. So to the extent that we can practically do that, that's what we're going to do. So we're looking at a system, it's called joint planted riprap, where you use large riprap, but you put soil material into that, and then you put plant material into that. And the roots and the boulders work together to sort of lock things in place. And it is very effective when there's a flooding situation. So a lot of the repair work that's gone on in the Catskills and elsewhere in downstate after Sandy and Lee and Irene and all of that has been this bioengineered, they call it, approach of this joint planted riprap.
Decades ago, there were trees and reeds. It wasn't natural.
Right.
And it got wiped out.
Right.
Because it's a major thoroughfare for the boats going on.
Yeah.
It's a big area for the channel, for the tides coming in and coming out. So having a dock there makes me nervous. You don't want to encourage people to get near the water because the water is swift there.
Right.
But the idea that the state has to kind of put it back to a pristine state can be negotiated in some way to say, come on, get real. This is never a swampy area. This has always been developed to some extent, and let's not pretend that we're going back to, Mohawks are going to be canoeing up and down the river.
Right, well, I agree with you, and that was the point that, Brandy and I certainly represented when we went and met with them. We didn't get very far with that. We all, Trustee Major's got the picture of the developed waterfront with all the warehouses and everything on her phone there, But, and it's not a settled negotiation yet, but in our first testing of the waters with DEC, this is what we've met, and this is what we're now bringing back so that everyone can hear, is that, you have to justify every inch because of the habitat loss for the critters, and the best justification that Tivoli has for any fill is that the overpass would not be structurally sound if it's not sort of, there's some fill just at that point where it lands.
And the state did recognize that there are areas where that bulkhead construction is going to be the only thing we're going to be able to do. So in particular, as Joel mentioned, where the footings are for the west side of the overpass, we'll be able to bulkhead that. But really what we're looking at is something more natural at either end. Yes,
And
ma'am?
just before,
I was just going to say that I went to a conference about all this a couple of years ago in Poughkeepsie, and what's interesting is at that point the DEC was very interested in the possibility of our going out to the old pilings and all that kind of stuff, so we can see that these things change. Now, maybe that those people that are being so difficult right now, you know, a few years from now, maybe they won't be there. And so I think we should keep our options open and the possibilities, and keep, you know, trying for a little bit more. I don't think we should give up, is all I'm saying. Don't give up.
I tend to think that way too, with the right personality, with the changing personality, even at the railroad. I mean, we've talked about this at the committee meetings. There might be a point where the railroad attitude would change and they would become more lenient about, you know, changing the terms of that negotiation. I know that's utterly wishful thinking, but you know what you said, Joel, is correct. We need to stabilize what we've got for sure, or else we want something that's just going to wash away, and then let the rest of the project follow as we can.
Other comments? Thank you.
Maybe just one more, sorry.
That's all right.
But
We wanna
I
have
don't
one to get
know,
there.
and I apologize for not keeping track of this, what the village has been doing to communicate with the Coast Guard regarding the issue of, we may have a beautiful park along the river looking at a anchorage, or several actually in our view shed. So we should all, and everyone in Tivoli should be well aware that we need to communicate to the Coast Guard our displeasure with that plan to store oil on the river in barges. And there is a plan for 43 of them to be installed from Yonkers up to just north of this area. And they will be in our view shed.
Yeah, so there would be 3 anchorages just below the bridge, with the idea being that they could be stacked up there and then come through one at a time because the channel is so narrow. And the board did send a letter to the Coast Guard.
And you attended.
I
And
went
the
and
deputy
spoke at a
mayor to a
hearing,
public hearing.
down in
Advocated
Croton,
for all this.
And I know that a lot of people in the village also wrote letters to that. And all we can do is stay on it and stay aware.
Okay, well, again, I want to thank you all for coming and for your comments. Is there a motion to adjourn this public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, folks. If you have other thoughts, you know, come see us, we're around.
And don't run away so quickly, we're having a board meeting.
We're going to take a 3-minute break, and then we're going to have a thrilling board meeting. The agenda's on the back table, and if there's something that you're interested in, we'd love to have you stick around.
Wait, wait. I'll get over
Okay.
to my Robert.
Just the hardcores.
Wait a minute, then we gotta.
You can't see my phone, can you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Okay,
You're not
it is
thinking what I got on it?
8:15, and I hereby call to order the January 2017
18.
17.
Oh, it is the year, right? I'm looking at she's spaced out.
Whoa, okay. Yes, that was a long public hearing. January 2017 meeting of the Village of Tivoli Board of Trustees. Would you please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, which is on our here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Village Clerk's report. Clerk Bruno, please.
Yes. In the office, we sold 320 trash tags. Planning board, they did not have a workshop and the meeting was canceled due to a holiday, so there were no planning board or zoning board of appeals workshops or meetings attended. Monday, February 20th, the clerk's office will be closed in observance of President's Day.
Thank you very much, Clerk Bruno. Trustees, we have 3 sets of minutes in your binders. December 21st regular board meeting, January 11th public hearing meeting minutes, and January 11th workshop minutes. You've had a chance to look these over. Is there a motion to adopt the 3 sets of minutes? Motion was made by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Trustee Schneider. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Moving on to a treasurer's report. We thank Treasurer Day for preparing this with help from the clerk. For this month, out of the general fund, we spent $42,297.08. Out of the water fund, $7,072.61. Out of the sewer fund, $5,198.44. And the expendable trust, $1,100 and no cents, for a grand total of $55,668.13. A large amount of that had to do with beginning some expenditures related to our CDBG grant on Pine Street, which is going to hopefully break ground next June, July. And also, what was it, CFA?
CFA?
Yes, the CFA, the shoreline stabilization. So those are expenditures that will be reimbursed to us through the grants. About $12,000 of this month's expense will be reimbursed. With that said, is there a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was Ravi, followed by Major. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Aye.
That was Schneider, followed by Israeli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Bills may be paid. Moving on to a zoning report, please. Trustee Israeli.
Yes. We received a total of $180 for building permits this month. A number of permits were issued, mostly for property line fence and for activities associated with the Tivoli Wine and Spirits Company, which is in the process of setting up. And there were a number of additional generator permits and solar power mounts. These were certificates which were completed, which had been issued earlier.
Very good. Thank you, Trustee Israeli. Before we get into public comment on the agenda items, I want to inform the public and the board that we are going to table number 3 tonight, adopting of the new Greenway guidelines. And Council, could you perhaps help me explain why we're doing that? We need to do a...
Right, so the county provided sort of generic secret documents for people to adapt, but they provide just the unlisted version of the documents as a short form. And we, because we're in a historic district, need to treat that as a type 1. So we need long form documents, and so we've asked Michelle to prepare those for you for the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you very much, Council. Public comment on agenda items. We've been through our public hearing on the waterfront already. Local law D, parking violations. We've got a resolution adopting the hazard mitigation plan annex for Tivoli, accepting Tivoli Fire Department officers. We have a budget modification to cover those grant expenditures, primarily that I mentioned earlier. Penalty regarding mailing notice of unpaid taxes, authorizing return check fee, and the Justice Court did win a grant. So is there any public comment on these agenda items? Seeing none, we'll jump right in here. So local law D, parking violations. We had our public hearing last week, and the board has become thoroughly familiar with this legislation. This has to do, well, we're doing several things. There were a few, basically governs parking around the village, where you can park and where you can't park. We added a few no parking areas, some sort of choke points where we've got yellow curbs, say, entering Furrow Avenue, at the Mason's lot, places where people really can't park so tightly on those curb cuts into the lots. And we are also increasing the penalties for violations. So your overnight snow ordinance ticket, which for many, many years has been $30, we are going to make it $45. Is there a motion to adopt local law D?
And could I just, for the record, that motion to adopt the resolution that's before the board?
Motion to adopt the resolution. What do I call that? Resolution local law D?
Right, and that resolution authorizes adoption of the local law.
Oh yes, I'm looking at the law itself. Authorizing adoption by the Village Board of Trustees of the Village of Tivoli Local Law D proposed of 2016 as Local Law 2 of 2017. Thank you, Council. Sorry, do we have a motion and a second? We got a motion from the Deputy Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'm just glad to sort of go through this section of code and clean it up and tighten it up. And, you know, we're a small village. Sometimes we get an awful lot of cars, and correct parking is important to quality of life here.
And that was something in conflict too, right?
Yes.
So check it off the list.
Check it off the list. Roll call vote, please. Deputy Mayor Major?
Aye.
Trustee Azrati?
Aye.
Trustee Schneider?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Moving on to resolution adopting Dutchess County Hazard Mitigation Plan Annex for the Village of Tivoli. Okay. So, in early 2015, Dutchess County won a large grant to prepare a hazard mitigation plan for the entire county. So every municipality within the county was tasked with completing what they call an annex. And it's several pages of talking about the village's assets, the location of certain assets in relation to floodplains, and sort of what, I think the county pursued that grant and won that grant after hurricanes and Sandy, Irene, etc. So Tivoli completed its part. Our annex and the entire plan can be found on the Dutchess County website. And although we have not sort of thought about this for about a year, the county's finally ready with their packaging of the whole plan, and it's time for each municipality to adopt their annex formally. So that's what this is for. Is there a motion to adopt the jurisdictional annex to the Dutchess County Hazard Mitigation Plan?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just think it's interesting, this has actually been in the works for a couple of years now, hasn't it?
Yes. And another, I think it also helps, if there is another severe weather event, it helps relief funding flow to the county and to the municipalities.
FEMA more efficient, the county's more efficient.
A roll call vote. Deputy Mayor Major?
Aye.
Trustee Azrati?
Aye.
Trustee Schneider?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Okay, we have, the Village Board of Trustees has received from the Tivoli Fire Company their company officers for 2017. And we need to accept these officers. I don't see tremendous changes from the lineup of last year. We have directors Ed Lynch, Ralph Torsha Sr., Tina Hogan, Terry Martin, Tom Chrissy Sr., Fire Officers, Chief Thomas Chrissy Jr., First Assistant Chief Mark Hildebrand, Second Assistant Chief Jeremy Moore, Captain Josh Coons, First Lieutenant Joseph Klum, Second Lieutenant Philip Chrissy, Fire Police Officers, Fire Police Captain Tom Chrissy Sr., First Lieutenant Ed Lynch, Second Lieutenant is open. Rescue Officers, Captain Cheryl Hillblant, First Lieutenant Robert Stickle, Second Lieutenant William Sakal, and Company Officers President Tom Christie Sr., Vice President Anthony Stafiro, Secretary Gail Torsha, Treasurer Terry Martin, and Corresponding Secretary Margaret Lemon. Is there a motion to accept the Tivoli Fire Department officers? Motion was made by Deputy Mayor and seconded by Trustee Schneider. Any discussion? I'll just say once again how fortunate we are in the Village of Tivoli to have such a robust fire company and rescue squad. It can never be said enough, and we appreciate the sacrifices that these men and women make for the well-being of the rest of us. So we wish them a great year going forward with these officers. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We have a resolution for a budget modification. As I explained to the trustees in the workshop, we had some large expenditures which went through the engineering line related to several grants. The total increase to those expenditures was $16,958.40. So we are establishing another line, a new budget line called grant money is due from local governments, where we are going to represent the money that we will be receiving later. Now, part of why we're separating that is because many of these grant reimbursements are not even going to come in this fiscal year. But I've spoken with the treasurer and our consultant about how to structure that. So we think we have a good budget in place so we can keep track of our grant expenditures and then the money that's going to be coming in later. Is there a motion to adopt this resolution with the budget modification?
So moved.
Is there a second? Deputy Mayor Major?
Aye.
Trustee Schneider?
Aye.
Trustee Israedi?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Moving on to a resolution authorizing additional penalty regarding mailing of notice of unpaid taxes pursuant to New York State Real Property Tax Law, Section 987. So because there is additional mailing, clerical work for the notice of unpaid taxes to an owner of real property, we are permitted to charge a fee of $2 for the additional time for our personnel, and we would like to do so. Is there a motion to resolve that be the case?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was Schneider, followed by Major. Roll call vote, please. Deputy Mayor Major?
Aye.
Trustee Schneider?
Aye.
Trustee Israedi?
Aye.
I also vote aye. And while we're doing that, we have a resolution authorizing a returned check fee. Should the village receive a bad check, we are permitted to attach a fee to that. And we are proposing to make that fee $20. Is there a motion to put this resolution authorizing return check fee on the table?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, that was Major and Israedi. Any discussion? We haven't had very many, is that correct? But if we ever do, it's going to be $20 now.
And this is what we're allowed.
Yes, this is the,
Maximum.
there is a limit. Okay, roll call vote, please. Deputy Mayor Major?
Aye.
Trustee Schneider?
Aye.
Trustee Israedi?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Resolution is adopted. And the last agenda item, I would like to congratulate on behalf of the Village Board of Trustees our relatively new court clerk, Theo Revelis, and Justice Clark. Clerk Revelis applied to the Justice Court Assistance Program for a grant and won that grant for the residents and taxpayers of Tivoli. That grant is in the amount of $3,117.77. And that is going to go towards some of the room enhancements that have already happened, some of the work on the walls, plastering, painting, and new furniture, new filing cabinets, and possibly a new rug. That grant is subject to the procurement of the village, and she'll have to shop around for her filing cabinets if they exceed the threshold. We've been through this a few years ago. Her predecessor, Clerk Malinsky, won one of these as well. So Tivoli's done pretty well. I think that's 2 in about 6 years. So, once again, thank you and congratulations to Clerk Revelis. And the Village Board would like to accept this grant. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we can accept those grant funds. The next board meeting will be held Wednesday, February 15th, 2017 at 7 p.m., preceded by a workshop at 6 p.m. here at the historic Watts de Peyster Hall. There will be a regular board workshop on February 8th, 2017 at 7 p.m. Moving on to committee reports. Trustee Israedi, please.
Yes, I just received the portfolio review for the LoSAP program. And since inception, we've earned about 5.3% returns, which is pretty good. It's had quite a bit of volatility, but this year was a good year. And the portfolio returned 5.5. No, that's cumulative. It was actually close to 11% this year, which brought us back into line. And the total amount that we have in that program is about $134,000, which divided by 20 firemen gives them about $6,500 each out of this program as a deferred income. And it's doing its job. They've brought in some younger fire persons, and that was the purpose of it, was to both retain and attract fire volunteers. So we're very pleased with that result. I would also like to comment on the wells. I'm learning as I go on this. I'm going to start this time with the final results, which is that we pumped between 50 and 60,000 gallons a day out of our 5 or 6 wells. And the month of December is the least rainfall that I've reported on. Any guesses? 3 inches. 1.5. And then a lot of scant traces on other days, but not enough to measure. So that's when you really appreciate your wells. The ballpark well was not pumping at all, but the McKnight well pumped every day of the month. The 2 Potts West well and the 5 Potts West wells were off most of the time, and but the 4 PE and the Potts East and the 10 Potts East wells made up the difference. And of course, the Woodmark well was pumping at 20 to 25,000 gallons a day throughout the period, and the water tower stayed at its, we like to see it between 165 and 170 feet, and it stayed in that range. And I understand we had no water main breaks until this week.
Yes. The superintendent noticed a leak on Montgomery Street near the entrance to the treatment plant. He's been observing it for a few days. It's been very slight, and I think they did a little prep this afternoon to really dig in tomorrow. And we hope that they find it quickly and don't have too much trouble with that.
And we're getting closer, I understand from the mayor, to having some information about our report on how to...
it must be closer.
Yeah.
It is getting closer.
To have a plan for refurbishing both our water and our sewer systems. And on the agenda for this coming year is to repaint the tanks for the sewer system. We'll probably be doing that between March and June.
Yes, and that is required of us by the DEC because they are towards the end of their lifespan and they need to be recoated.
Yep. So that's pretty much mine.
Thank you, Trustee Israedi. Trustee Schneider, please.
All right, so the Tivoli Village Court Charge Volume Summary Report for the period of December 1st through December 31st. Total charges received were 16. Total charges disposed were 31. And a total of $1,080 was collected and remitted to the state comptroller. Just taking a look back through the report here, I see a tremendous volume in tickets for no overnight parking. So
20 at least.
Absolutely. So know that we are aware of that. We've obviously been handing out tickets for that. If you do need to obtain a parking permit, please visit Robin in the clerk's office and she can help you take care of that.
We had an open container and 2 unreasonable noise
Yes, we
tickets.
did.
Were, it's like 100 for the open container, 200 for unreasonable noise, and 150 for unreasonable noise. So. That's it.
All set?
Okay, thank you, Trustee Schneider. Forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting, we're missing Trustee Murphy, and we hope he's having a wonderful vacation, and he'll be back next month. Deputy Mayor Major.
Okay, well, at the library, Tuesdays, story time with Miss Penny, 10:30. Thursdays, 10 to 2, the fiber enthusiasts have their potluck gathering, and that's every Thursday. And Friday afternoons, the new program is Dungeons and Dragons. I think that starts at 4, but check the library website for details on that. One of the highlights of the winter social season is coming up. That is the annual soup night at the Elmendorf. Yes. Which is on Saturday the 28th. It's from 6 to 8. There will be lots of great soups. I think Trustee Maserati is making one.
I'm making one. Okay. We're going to have some new kinds of soup.
Really?
Yeah. Taco soup.
How can you say no? It's $10 at the door and $6 for children under 12. You will not find anything better to do with your Saturday.
And there will be music, live music.
Music too?
Yep.
Well then.
Now you have to go.
And you can bring children. Or old aunts or whoever you want.
Everybody, bring everybody.
Thank
That's
you.
all I got.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a few things. We were talking about the elevator and the lift in our public hearing, and we did just have this elevator had its quarterly inspection. And conditions down there were dry in the pit, which is excellent news. You may recall we did have to do a pretty substantial drainage project on the back of this building, and it seems to be working, so that's great news. Also, we talked about the water leak on Montgomery Street. You may see the gentleman out there working tomorrow. We talked about the treatment tanks. You may have seen Dutchess County DPW putting some flags around the bridge. They are still on schedule to refurbish our bridge starting in June. It's supposed to take 4 to 5 months. I know they got the Linden Avenue Bridge done on ahead of schedule. I hope we can be so lucky, but looks like that's still on track, and you can see the little flags they put out there for where the bridge is going to be a little longer, a little wider. And lastly, I'm pleased we finally were able to get a light on the Welcome to Tivoli sign as you drive into the village. It's bright. I hope it's not too bright for people, but I think it works, and it really. I hope acts as a beacon as you turn off an 9G, and it's a pretty dark stretch there for quite a while. So now there's some light, and we want to welcome residents back to their homes and all visitors into the village. I can think of going to dinner in Tivoli from some other town and driving in and almost wondering, is it this way still? So I hope I hope our businesses see it as an improvement, because that's how it's intended.
I actually think that new speed sign is also welcoming. It has this impact. You come up to it and it tells you that you're going too fast, and then you slow down and you say, oh, I'm entering the village, and it thanks you. So, it's all good.
Working on the approach to dear old Tivoli. So, we would like to open it up now for public comment on any topic.
Anything at all?
Soups?
Speaking of the Tivoli sign, what happened to the sign that was on 9G? Is there going to be one replacing that one?
With the businesses listed, that sign? That's the one? So, one of those blew down south of the intersection, and the one north of the intersection is still there. I believe that New York State DOT is concerned about those signs, so we are not necessarily going to put that one back up. I think
We are not putting it back up?
No, I think we need to talk to them. Those signs were on the list of considerations around that intersection where there's been a lot of effort to improve safety. So I know that some in our business community want some kind of sign out there, so we're going to have to talk to DOT and ask them what exactly was the objection to the preceding signs and what could be, what would they accommodate. So I think
But there will be something eventually indicating that Tivoli's that way.
I certainly hope that they will let us.
I didn't realize it was missing until I had given somebody directions to turn at the sign, turn left at the sign where it says Tivoli.
And your landmark had
They said
disappeared.
there's no sign saying that there's Tivoli.
I would love something that just says Tivoli, turn west. The rest will be made clear when you get there, so.
I think the problem was that there was a lot on that sign, that it was in small print, and the concern was that it was distraction to the driver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further comments, any comments from the board?
Just wanted to take a minute to thank everybody who came out to the public meeting for the Tivoli Waterfront
Good turnout.
Park. It was a really great turnout, and one of the things I appreciate most about our village is that however difficult the conversation, there's never a shortage of feedback. And I think it's important to hear all sides of any given situation, so I really appreciate everybody who came and participated.
Look forward to reading those minutes.
Absolutely.
And I would like to thank the mayor. This was a housekeeping agenda tonight, a lot of little things, but those are important things to get resolved. They tend to, when they're not done correctly, they tend to nag at you and create extra cost and interfere with proper execution of code and so forth. So thanks for bringing those to the board's attention.
You are welcome. I've learned any rock you ever turn, there's a lot to do under there, so take them up one at a time. Right? Yes. Okay, if that is all then, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. It is 8:44 and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. If you will, next time I said that.
For it.